The house was quiet that morning. It had always been quiet since the children moved out. But that day, it was different. The kind of quiet that feels too heavy for a celebration. My hands were clumsy tying the ribbon on a small box of chocolates, her favorites, or at least they used to be. It was her 71st birthday. I should have remembered the kind she liked best, but I picked whatever was on sale. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the slice of morning sun hitting the table, and waited for her to come down. She used to hum in the mornings. It was always something soft, some tune from a song she never remembered the name of. She hadn't done that in a long time. I told myself it was age, or habit, or just one of those things that slip away quietly over the years. When she walked in, she was already dressed. A simple cardigan, the pale blue one I gave her years ago. Her hair was tied back loosely, gray strands escaping like they always did. She smiled when she saw the little cake I bought, but it was the kind of smile that doesn't quite touch the eyes. I noticed it. I did, but I said nothing. "Happy birthday," I said, placing the box in front of her. She nodded. "Thank you, James." And then she added, almost as an afterthought, "You remembered." It stung a little. I always remembered. Or maybe I just told myself I did. She sat down at the table and ran her fingers lightly over the edge of the plate. I poured her coffee, like I did every morning, 2 sugars and a splash of milk. That hadn't changed, but she barely touched it. "I thought maybe we could drive out to the lake later, get some fresh air, like we used to." She looked out the window for a moment before answering. "Maybe." That was all she said. Not yes, not no, just maybe. I laughed nervously, trying to lighten the mood. "You used to love the lake." She nodded again, but kept looking out the window. "I still do. I just don't feel like going anywhere today." And just like that, the conversation ended. There was no birthday call from our son, no card from our daughter. They'd probably forgotten, or they'd remember by evening and send a quick message. She didn't mention it. I didn't, either. But I saw her eyes drift to the phone more than once that morning. After lunch, I lit a single candle on the small cake and brought it to her. I asked her to make a wish, like I always did, even though it felt silly now. She smiled politely, looked down at the candle, and closed her eyes for a moment before blowing it out. I asked, "What did you wish for?" She looked at me, long and steady, and said, "Peace." I thought she meant quiet, a break from the noise of the world. I didn't realize what kind of peace she was really longing for. That night, after dinner, she sat in the armchair by the window and read a book, or at least she pretended to. I watched her from the couch, the glow of the lamp outlining her face. She looked small, fragile even, and something inside me stirred, a feeling I hadn't had in years, like I was looking at someone I didn't quite know anymore, like she had become a stranger I had lived with for decades. I wanted to say something, but I didn't know what, so I said nothing. That was the problem, I think. I had been saying nothing for years. The next morning, she was up early. I heard the kettle boil and the soft clink of her teacup. When I entered the kitchen, she was already dressed and reading the newspaper. She looked up at me and said, "Thank you for yesterday." I smiled. Of course. But I remember how her eyes lingered on mine, like she was waiting for me to say more, like she needed me to notice, like there was something she wanted to tell me, but no longer had the energy to explain. And I missed it. Again. For most of our lives, people said we had the perfect marriage. Friends would nudge each other at dinner parties, say things like, "You two are still holding hands. That's rare these days." And I believed them. We weren't the most romantic couple in the world, but we were steady, safe, dependable. I thought that was enough. We met when I was 23 and she was 20. She was the kind of woman that didn't speak loudly, but somehow made everyone listen. Her presence filled a room, not with noise, but with calm. I was drawn to her, like a man drawn to shelter in a storm. She had that stillness, that inner strength that made everything feel okay. We married within a year, rented a small apartment above a bakery. I can still smell the fresh bread in the mornings, still hear her humming while she folded laundry. We didn't have much, but we had each other. That's what people say, right? I used to believe it was all that mattered. She was always better at love than I was. She noticed things, remembered birthdays, favorite meals, unspoken moods. I was busy chasing promotions, fixing leaky faucets, paying bills. She was building a home, while I was just keeping lights on. And I mistook that for balance. When the kids came along, she poured herself into motherhood like it was a sacred duty. Every night she sat beside them and read stories. Every morning she packed their lunches with handwritten notes. I worked late, brought home groceries, paid for braces. I thought I was being a good father, and maybe I was, but now, looking back, I wonder, was I ever truly present? She stopped painting after our second child was born. I asked her why once. She shrugged and said, "There's no time anymore." I nodded, satisfied. But now I realize that was her way of telling me she missed herself, that something in her was slipping away. We had our routines, Sunday pancakes, anniversary dinners at the same little Italian place. I kissed her on the forehead before bed every night. I never cheated, never raised my voice. I thought those things meant I was doing my part. But love is more than not doing harm. It's seeing, hearing, asking. It's noticing the little cracks before they become walls. She never complained, never asked for more. That's what fooled me. I took her silence for contentment. I wore my loyalty like a badge of honor while she quietly folded herself smaller and smaller. And here's the thing I can't stop thinking about now. She loved me in ways I didn't even notice. She remembered how I liked my socks folded. She brewed my coffee exactly the way I liked, even when she no longer drank any herself. She sat through endless football games just to be near me. And all the while, I thought we were fine. Because she didn't fight. She didn't argue. She didn't demand. She just faded. Looking back, there were signs, small ones. The way she lingered by the window longer each day. How she started forgetting words, not because of age, but because no one had asked her opinion in a while. The way she sometimes walked through the house like a ghost, quietly fixing, tidying, existing. And me? I was too busy patting myself on the back for being a good husband. Now I wonder how many smiles I mistook for happiness. How many dinners passed in silence that I accepted as comfort, not distance. How many birthdays I celebrated with gifts but not presents. We celebrated our 45th wedding anniversary with a dinner at home. I made spaghetti. She wore a soft gray sweater and lit a candle. We ate quietly. I told her I loved her. She smiled and said, "I know." But something in that moment, the way her eyes didn't meet mine, the way her hands trembled just slightly, should have told me I didn't really know her anymore. Not the way I once did. not the way I should have. After our children left for college, the house felt big in a way I hadn't expected. Too quiet, too still, but I got used to it. I filled the silence with TV, with garden work, with errands that didn't need doing. I thought she adjusted too. She didn't. At least not in the way I believed. She stopped decorating for holidays, said it felt silly now. No stockings on the mantle, no fresh flowers in spring. I figured it was part of aging, a slowing down, a simplifying. But really, I think she was giving up on things that once gave her joy. She started going to bed earlier. I stayed up later. For years, we shared the same mattress, but not the same sleep. And somewhere in that slow drift, we lost the rhythm we once had. She stopped calling her sister every Sunday like she used to. They had been close, always laughing on the phone. When I asked, she said, "She's busy these days." But I wonder now if that was the beginning of her withdrawal, not from her sister, but from the world. There were more changes, small but sharp in hindsight. She stopped putting on lipstick before going out. She didn't bother fixing her hair some mornings. She used to take pride in those little rituals, not for vanity, but for herself. It made her feel seen, important. I thought she was just getting older. But that wasn't it. She stopped journaling. I remember once finding her old notebooks, pages filled with dreams, observations, recipes, stories. There were no new ones after 2012. Just blank journals collecting dust on the shelf. I asked her about them one evening. She just said, "I don't really have anything to write about these days." And I didn't ask further. She stopped going out with her friends. They'd call, she'd decline. I assumed she was tired. I didn't realize she was lonely. There's a kind of loneliness that settles in like fog, slow, silent, creeping. And if you're not paying attention, it fills the room without you even noticing.
She once told me she missed hearing music in the house. I hadn't thought about it until then. We used to play records on Sunday mornings. She'd hum along while making eggs. I had boxed up those records years ago to make room for more practical things. I never thought to bring them back out. She never asked. But one afternoon, I walked in and found her sitting on the couch, holding an old record sleeve. No music playing, just holding it like a photo of something she'd lost. She smiled when she saw me and said, "Do you remember this one? We danced to it the night before our wedding." I did remember. I nodded, but I didn't put it on. I just said, "Yeah," and changed the subject. Why didn't I put it on? I keep asking myself that now. One simple gesture, one song. It might have reminded her she was still seen, still heard, still loved. Instead, I let the moment pass. And so did she. The truth is, I thought I was being enough. I thought sitting beside her during dinner was enough. Asking how her day was without really listening was enough. Watching the news together was enough. I thought my quiet loyalty spoke volumes. But she needed more than loyalty. She needed presence. She needed someone to ask her, "What do you miss? What do you need? Are you still happy?" I never asked. And she never said, but her silence, now I see, was not contentment. It was surrender. A quiet resignation to a life that once made her feel alive, but now only asked her to exist. I didn't know she was dying inside. Not from illness, not from age, but from being unseen, unheard, unfelt. And it all led to that final birthday. That final wish she whispered with tired eyes. Peace. 3 weeks after her birthday, I found her on the floor of our bedroom. She'd collapsed early in the morning. Too early for me to have been awake. I remember the sound that woke me, a soft thud, like a book falling. I rushed in, and there she was, breathing, but barely. Her skin pale, her lips faintly blue. The ambulance came quickly. I followed the flashing lights to the hospital. I sat in the waiting room gripping a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. Hours blurred together. When the doctor approached, I already knew before he said the words. It was her heart, he said gently. She had a condition, likely for years. Years. She knew. She had known all along. She never told me. I sat in her hospital room after they took her away, just me, the empty bed, and a folded piece of paper placed neatly on her nightstand. My name was written on it in her handwriting. Steady, graceful, still hers. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. I didn't want to know what it said. I was afraid that reading it would make everything too real, that it would confirm the ache in my chest wasn't just grief, but guilt. Her letter was not long, but every word was a weight. James, if you're reading this, then I've already gone ahead of you. I didn't mean to keep secrets, but I didn't want my final days to be filled with hospitals and worry. I wanted to spend them quietly. I wanted to still be your wife, not your patient. There are things I should have said, but I didn't know how to say them without sounding ungrateful. You gave me a home. You were faithful. You worked hard. I always knew you loved me, just not in the way I needed most. I needed to be asked what I was feeling. I needed someone to notice when I stopped singing, when I stopped smiling. I needed it to know it mattered. Over time, I began to disappear inside, not from your actions, but from the absence of your attention. And I take responsibility for not speaking up. I was raised to endure, but enduring isn't the same as living. I hope you remember me as more than just your wife. I was once a girl who dreamed of painting galleries, who danced barefoot in the kitchen, who sang to the radio with her eyes closed. I was her once. I wanted to be her again. It's not too late for you to look around and really see people. Ask them how they are. Wait for the real answer. Please, don't let others fade like I did. I'll be with you always. But I need you to live now, not just survive. With love, Clara. I read the letter 3 times before I could breathe again. Each sentence peeled back the layers of my memory. Every line exposed moments I had ignored, smiles I had dismissed, silences I had filled with assumptions.
She had lived beside me for decades, but inside, she was vanishing. Slowly, quietly. Not from sickness alone, but from being unseen. That thought has haunted me ever since.
I went back home that night, clutching the letter like a fragile truth. I sat in her chair by the window, the one she always claimed was too drafty, but still returned to every evening. I ran my fingers over the armrest, closed my eyes, and for the first time in years, I played the old record, the one from our wedding night, her favorite. I placed her picture on the table beside me, and I cried. Not just for losing her, but for never truly seeing her when I had the chance. After Clara's funeral, the house became something else entirely. It was no longer just quiet, it was hollow. Every room echoed differently without her presence. The kitchen didn't smell like tea anymore. The radio stayed silent. Her knitting basket sat untouched beside her chair, yarn still wrapped around a half-finished scarf she never got to complete. For the first few days, I went through the motions, accepting condolences, replying to sympathy cards, making coffee without drinking it. Our children flew in, stayed for a short while, then returned to their lives. They loved her, but they hadn't known she was fading either. They carried their own guilt, though not as heavy as mine. I spent hours sitting in the living room, just listening. Not to music, not to television, but to the silence she left behind. It had a texture, a shape. It curled in corners. It followed me down the hall. And sometimes, when I closed my eyes, I swore I could hear her footsteps. Faint, familiar, gone before I turned around. I began reading her old journals. She hadn't kept many entries in the later years, but the ones from our early marriage were filled with wonder. She described our mornings in detail, the way I looked when I was shaving, how she felt when I laughed too loud at her jokes. She wrote about hope, about possibility. And then, entries started changing. Words became more practical, then sparse, then absent. The shift wasn't obvious at first, but once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. The silence in her writing mirrored the silence in our marriage. The pages stopped long before her life did. One afternoon, I opened a drawer in her nightstand and found a folded piece of paper tucked beneath old photographs. It was a list. Not a grocery list or a to-do list, but a list of questions. Ones she must have written to herself. Or maybe to me, I don't know. When was the last time he looked at me like he used to? Does he know I still dream of the ocean? If I had disappeared, how long would it take for him to notice I'm gone, not physically, but emotionally? Why is it so hard to say I miss myself out loud? Am I still lovable if I no longer feel needed? I stared at that last question for a long time. Clara had been asking for help, quietly, without a scene, without blame, just hoping someone might hear what she wasn't saying. And I hadn't. I think the hardest part of aging isn't the wrinkles or the slower steps. It's the realization that time is no longer something you can waste, that there are no later conversations, no next week fixes, that love, if unattended, doesn't always die loudly. It dissolves, silently, like fog in morning light. I started doing something I hadn't done in years, talking out loud to her. Every morning I'd pour her a cup of tea, set it across from mine, and speak. I told her about the birds in the yard, about the weather, about how the neighbor's dog kept digging up the roses again. I told her I missed her laugh. I told her I was sorry I hadn't noticed the music leaving her eyes. Sometimes I read her letters, the ones I began writing to her after she passed, not because I thought she could read them, but because I needed to say what I hadn't said. I needed to tell her that I finally saw her, that I was learning how to see even now, that I was trying to become the man she believed I could be, just a few years too late. Her birthday came again. 1 year had passed. I didn't tell anyone. No calls to the children, no Facebook post, no reminder on the calendar. But I had known the date was coming for weeks. My body remembered it before my mind did, this strange weight in my chest, like grief preparing a seat at the table. I woke up early that morning and made tea for two. Out of habit or out of hope, I don't know. I placed her favorite mug across from mine, the blue one with the little chip on the handle. She never wanted me to throw it away, said, "Even chipped things still carry warmth." I whispered, "Happy birthday, Clara," to the empty room. Then I got in the car and drove. The lake wasn't far. The same lake I had suggested visiting on her last birthday, the one she quietly declined, and I never pushed. It was where we used to walk in spring, back when our hands still found each other easily, when love was loud and uncomplicated. The air was crisp that morning, but the light was soft. Gentle ripples moved across the water like memory itself, never still, always returning. I sat on a wooden bench near the shore and pulled out a small cake I'd bought from the grocery store. Nothing fancy, just like last year. One candle. I lit it, shielding the flame with my hand. Then I said the words I never said while she was alive. "I'm sorry. I see you now. I love you. Not just for what you did, but for who you were. Who you always were." I let the silence carry those words outward. Maybe to her, maybe just to myself. Then I reached into my coat pocket and unfolded a note. My own letter this time. I placed it in a small jar and buried it beneath the tree we used to sit under. A ritual no one else would ever know about. But it felt right. Inside I had written, "You gave your life gently, piece by piece, and I mistook your strength for satisfaction. I know better now. I only wish you were still here to feel the difference. This isn't just grief. It's a reckoning. I'm learning how to live with what I missed, and how to offer better love moving forward. Wherever you are, I hope there's music playing again. I hope you're painting. I hope you're dancing barefoot without any weight on your chest. And I hope you forgive me for not seeing sooner." The wind picked up slightly as I stood there. A breeze passed through the trees, and for just a moment I felt something. Faint, but real. A kind of warmth, as if she had heard me. As if she had been waiting for that moment all along. It's been over a year now. The days are quieter. The seasons continue, indifferent to loss. Birds still come to the feeder. The mail still arrives. Life doesn't pause just because a heart breaks. But something inside me shifted. There's a chair in the living room I never sit in. It's hers. I leave it that way, not out of superstition, but out of respect. That's where she used to watch the sky turn amber every evening. She called that time of day the golden hush. Now I sit across from it, sometimes talking to her, sometimes just listening. I'm not the same man I was when she died. I've learned that love isn't measured by anniversaries or photographs or the absence of betrayal. It's measured by attention, by presence, by choosing every day to look into someone's eyes and ask, "Are you okay?" And waiting, truly waiting, for the answer. I've started asking people more questions now. Real ones. I stop in the grocery store when I see a familiar face and ask how they're really doing. I write letters to my children now, not just texts. I tell my grandson that I love his laugh, because maybe one day he'll wonder if anyone noticed. I want him to know that I did. Sometimes when I see couples sitting across from each other in silence, I want to walk over and whisper, "Don't wait until it's too late. Speak now. Listen now." She may not tell you she's fading, but if you watch closely, you'll see it. Clara taught me that. Not in lectures, but in absence, in memory, in all the moments I should have seen her more clearly. She was never loud, but her silence should have been louder than anything. I just didn't know how to listen, until it was too late. If there's one thing I can say to those of you still lucky enough to have someone beside you, it's this. Don't assume silence means peace. Don't mistake routine for connection. Don't believe that simply staying is the same as truly loving. Look up from your phone. Pause your to-do list. Watch how they hold their coffee cup. Notice when their voice dims, when their eyes don't light up the way they used to. Ask, gently, kindly, and be ready to really hear. Because love doesn't die in arguments. It dies in the quiet. And if you're not careful, one day you'll find yourself holding a letter you can't reply to, whispering words you should have said when they could still hear them. I didn't know my wife was dying inside, but I do now. And if these words reach just one person in time, maybe that will be enough. Maybe that's how I'll honor her, by helping someone else see, before it's too late. Thank you for listening. If this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to Elderly Wisdom Glow. It helps us continue sharing stories that matter. Stories that remind us to love more fully, to see more clearly, and to live with fewer regrets. Leave a comment with number 1 if you watched the whole video. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe and ring the bell to join us for more heartfelt reflections every week. We appreciate you. Until next time.